Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. We've been told over and over that our democratic republic nearly died on January 6th because of a riot. We were told that Trump essentially tried to overthrow the American government. We know that that's not true. We already relitigated all of this. It was the FBI. This is a continuation of everything that we were told, right? Over and over again. Democracy dies in darkness, and all of this. We were told that we were apparently all going to die and that nukes were going to be launched because of January 6th. Trump was an unstable tyrant. He had an authoritarian impulse. And today, he can't even be allowed to access social media, Twitter, Facebook, none of it. I don't even think Instagram. He's dangerous. Of course, everything the left says has been projection, because so far they've proven that they are the ones with the authoritarian impulse. They are the ones who consistently will not accept outcomes of elections. They are the ones who will not abide by the democratic processes or laws. And now we're discovering that there was an actual coup it was an actual attempted coup, an actual insurrection during the end of Trump's term. But it didn't happen on January 6th. It began months before. Now, there's a new book out. It's called Peril. It's by Washington Post reporters Bob Woodward, who I do not trust as far as I could throw him, which is not at all, and Robert Costa, who I trust a little more. It's now being revealed that General Mark Milley, who picked up the phone, called the Chinese counterpart over in the Communist Chinese Party, the PLA, the People's Liberation Army. There were two separate calls. One was before the election on October 20th of 2020, and then the second one was on January 8th, 2021, in a bid to avert what he was saying was going to be armed conflict. And can you believe that he actually knew someone over there where he could just pick up the phone and call his actual counterpart in the Communist Chinese PLA? General Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he made these secret calls, two at least that we know of. I don't know about any others. I'm sure there's more, to his Chinese counterpart. Again, this is all the final days of the Trump administration, because he apparently believed that Trump is going to order some kind of attack on China. Just call it up and order some kind of strike like it was pizza. So this was all happening right before there was all of this argument over whether or not Trump could even be trusted for this during the election. Maybe Trump is going to try to steal the 2020 election. And as it turned out, he was being undermined this entire time. During every single call, Milley assured the Chinese, the PLA, that the United States was not preparing to strike, that democracy was okay, everything's great. According to this book, Peril, General Milley reportedly told his, again, Communist Chinese counterpart in October, quote, "General Lee, I want to assure you that the American government is stable and everything is going to be okay. We're not going to attack or conduct any kinetic operations against you," end quote. Now, according to Woodward and Costa, Milley even pledged to alert the Communist Chinese in the event that the United States would strike. Milley said that he would let them know. That's the definition of treason. General Milley went on to say this to General Lee, again, PLA-CCP, quote, "General Lee, you and I have known each other for 5 years now. If we're going to attack, I'm going to call you ahead of time. It's not going to be a surprise," end quote. Now, this all was happening this afternoon, so it's all a little crazy, but Axios this morning had written a piece where it seemed like they were suggesting that Milley pretty much contributed with Costa and Woodward in the writing of this book because everything was so detailed and the quotes were very exact. And Milley pretty much confirmed that all of that happened. He also said, yes, he said it, nothing to see here. Just the American military's just Joint Chief of Staff, the chairman, committing treason, going behind the back of a sitting president who is the avatar for the people and communicating with our communist geopolitical enemies that he will warn them if the president was going to order an attack. And by the way, what attack? When did Trump ever? He called the guy down in North Korea, he called him Rocket Man. I mean, that was appropriate. When did Trump ever indicate any desire for any kind of kinetic war with China? We'll come back to this in a second. But apparently, according to Woodward and Costa's book, in January, Milley reportedly tried to dial down Chinese concerns about American stability in the aftermath of the riot at the U.S. Capitol. Great job, media. Milley told General Lee this in January, quote, "We are 100% steady. Everything's fine. But democracy can be sloppy sometimes," end quote. Yeah, democracy gets really sloppy when the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is busy committing treason. And by the way, that's not democracy. And hi, Marxist, treason isn't patriotism. Milley broke the chain of command. This is dangerous. The president cannot make good, calculated decisions if he doesn't know what is being communicated to allies or enemies. Or worse, if he can't even trust that his direction is being communicated through the chain of command. This is an insanely dangerous precedent. Former acting Secretary of Defense Christopher Miller, who served under Trump. Now, it's important to note, he was there. He wasn't in office for the first call on October 20th. He was in as acting secretary for the second call. That's the one that took place on January 8th. And he said that he, quote, did not and would not ever authorize those calls, end quote. So Miller didn't even authorize it. He went on to say that, quote, if the reporting in Woodward's book is accurate, it represents a disgraceful and unprecedented act of insubordination by the nation's top military officer, end quote. Now, Miller also added that if the story of Milley's histrionic outbursts and his unsanctioned anti-constitutional involvement in foreign policy proved to be true, he said that, and this is all a quote, he must resign immediately or be fired by the Secretary of Defense to guarantee the sanctity of the officer corps, end quote. So everyone, no matter where you stand on this political spectrum, whether you're far left, far right, whether you're in between, I don't care. Everybody should demand accountability for this. Like, what if this was used against Democrats? Can you imagine? What if this was done to Barack Obama? We got more on that in a moment. This whole thing is a Pandora's box of bad precedents that you do not want to open. It is so bad that even Alexander Vindman, he's also a traitor. Alexander Vindman, the guy, he's the United States Army Lieutenant Colonel. He was leaking classified information to the press, and he helped to try to get Trump impeached without a single criminal charge over the non-story of a phone call to the Ukrainian president. He said this, quote, if this is true, General Milley must resign. He usurps civilian authority. Gosh, bold and underline that right there. Civilian authority. He broke chain of command. He violated the sacrosanct principle of civilian control over the military. It is an extremely dangerous precedent. You can't simply walk away from that, end quote. I mean, I cannot believe that I am saying that he's not wrong, but Alexander Vindman is not wrong. My mouth can't say the word right. I can't, not with him. But treason like this, if it's allowed to go unaddressed, if control is ripped away from the hands of the civilians, this represents a complete and total breakdown of our system. But more than that, this is an absolute affront to the Republic and our democratic process. So in 2016, you voted in an election. You may not have gotten the person that you wanted, but sometimes elections don't go your way. A lot of people got the person that they voted for, and they elected the commander-in-chief, and his name was not Mark Milley. His name was Donald Trump. And I need people who are on the other side of the aisle to get over their obsessive single white female stalker hatred of Donald Trump. He presided over the United States by the authority of the people's consent granted by way of vote. The president is the avatar of the people collectively. General Milley is unelected. This was an attempted military coup. This is why we need an investigation to figure out exactly what happened. If everything in this weighs out, and so far Milley's confirming it, and so are other people, he had absolutely no right to subvert the American people's will by having back-channel conversations with a general who represented the Communist Party of China, and that's exactly what this is. As I explained today on radio, it is incredibly shocking that people are so politically tribal, that we have these zealots who are more for party than country, that they are actually willing to sacrifice the authority of their consent to defend an unelected general who views himself as greater than the authority granted to him by the Constitution. The military is controlled by its civilian populace. Our founders were very careful about this, and this is the key to the function of our republic. And this general controverted this entire process. But it doesn't stop there. The book goes on to explain that Milley also ordered senior military officers to review protocols for nuclear weapons, reminding each that while the president could give the order, Milley had to be involved in the process. And again, that's the sound of an unelected general subtly indicating to military personnel that Trump really isn't in charge. Again, this is insubordination, and it's also, especially his offer to the Chinese, that's treason. Now, of course, all of the people who claim that Trump committed treason when he nominated Neil Gorsuch or Brett Kavanaugh or Amy Coney Barrett to the court, you remember that whole Mueller is coming, all that garbage, or people who said, like actual people on television, like blue check verified people on social media, who said that I was a traitor because I supported the Second Amendment, or that you were a traitor if you wore a red hat, or you participated in our democratic process by casting a vote for your preferred candidate, that candidate being Trump. Suddenly, they don't want to talk about treason when it actually appears in front of them. Do you all remember General Stanley McChrystal? Do you remember all he did? He did an interview with Rolling Stone magazine, and he made a couple jokes about Barack Obama and Vice President Joe Biden at the time. And he and senior colleagues, he talked about some of the senior colleagues, joked about some of the policies, and Obama fired him. He fired David Petraeus because Petraeus criticized him privately. And you might be aware that Biden now, as we speak, is purging Trump appointees in this petty mantram, really, from military boards. People like Megan Mobbs and Sean Spicer, senior counselor to the former President Trump, Kellyanne Conway, retired General Jack Keane. Really? Joe Biden, whose only military experience is constantly bringing up his late son, is going to actually demand that retired General Jack Keane, someone who, no matter who is the president of the United States, listens to the Constitution and understands that it is only at the behest of the people. Why? Because their politics, the people who are being demanded to step down, their politics are different. Milley's actions are an absolute subversion of democracy, of process and chain of command. And when something like this happens, an investigation must be held. This is why we have hearings, literally. And if the evidence merits, heads must roll. Milley's spokesman, Colonel Dave Butler, said Milley was, quote, in keeping with his duties and conveyed reassurance in order to maintain strategic stability, end quote. With China? Now, as I said, Axios reported that either China was fed bad information, bad intel, or they were wagging the dog, or maybe both. Now, if someone was feeding China bad intel, who? Who was it? Why? CIA? Who? Deep State? Who was it? Russia? What attack on China? Who was talking about attacking China? Trump? This is the same Trump that has been consistently for the past 20 years and longer vocally opposed to these forever wars, nation building, and war Inc. in the Middle East and elsewhere in the world. This is the same Trump that signed the Abraham Accords, the anniversary of which is today. The same Trump who wanted to end the long conflict in Afghanistan, the mission creep, and begin the drawdown. Are we talking about the same Trump? I mean, Biden's the one who's droning kids. Trump is the most anti-war president in modern history. But now that we know that General Mark Milley, he thought he was commander-in-chief and not Trump, it's just interesting to look back and gain a little bit of insight into what self-appointed commander-in-chief Mark Milley thinks of China. Turns out he thinks that China is not really an enemy. I can't even believe this video. Watch this.
With respect to China, what normally happens historically, it's not in all cases, but in most cases, where you have economic growth of that magnitude typically follows military power. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a significant increase in Chinese military capabilities over the last 10 to 20 years. And they are going to develop themselves and are developing themselves into a great power. That is not to say, however, that they are an enemy.
Not to say that they're an enemy. Oh, they're a geopolitical foe, for sure. So General Mark Milley has determined that we have nothing to fear from the communist regime of China. Yes, that same regime, the one that just gave the world a Frankenvirus that killed millions of people, right? The one that's been stealing IP, threatening Taiwan. Did you see the reports today that they were sailing some warships by the Aleutian Islands near the coast of Alaska? Yeah, nothing to worry about, right? According to General Milley. So you know what General Milley did? He just dialed up General Lee. I'm sorry, you must be a communist if you have a communist phone number and you can just dial them up and say, yo, what's up, General Lee? Wrong general, good heavens. And just decide to telegraph America's foreign policy to the CCP because Milley, who you didn't elect, decided that he gets to make foreign policy calls for America? So now we know there was a real insurrection and a coup of sorts, and there could have been real consequences. What if they would have just carried out a first strike? What if they would have done something economically? Or another Frankenvirus? Who knows? We don't even know what the consequences would have been. I have to say, I've never been a tinfoil hat. I've never been a deep state type of person, but you got to ask, what in Sam hell is going on? We saw our intel agencies weaponized against the former president, and nobody was held to account. They literally tried to take down a private citizen because he worked for the interim team for the incoming president of the United States in 2016. And then when they discovered that he was a CIA asset, they actually omitted that from the documents during the FOIA request period. And that guy got removed from the FBI and he's on probation now as a result of it. I have an idea of how he could be serving time. And we have our own State Department eavesdropping on a presidential call to Ukraine to try to get Trump impeached for literally there was nothing in this call. It's all fine and good, apparently. We've watched as legacy press and big tech work in lockstep with the Democrat Party to censor and suppress stories like the Hunter Biden shady dealings with foreign governments. You know, the New York Times actually removed the unsubstantiated from one of their headlines after they got a lot of pushback from saying it was an unsubstantiated story about his laptop. Then why does the FBI and DOJ, why do they have them? Why do they have the hard drive and copies? Thank you. Nothing is ever done about any of this. And now we discover that one of the main advisors to the president has gone rogue. In fact, according to Axios, it appears General Milley has made a habit of leaking and talking with various authors who were writing books about Trump. Representative Jim Banks tweeted this about Milley, Milley needed to account for his behavior, saying, quote, "It's past time." He personally leaked this because he thought it makes him look good, which I agree with. Shows disdain for nonpartisan military and the American system of government, end quote. It looks like Mark Milley's the one that had white rage. Maybe red rage now. Can't even say it. If General Mark Milley's leaks get him, wouldn't it be ironic if that's what got him court-martialed for treason? In any case, Joint Chief Chairman Mark Milley, he goes before Congress on September 28th. That's my birthday. Thank you. Happy birthday to me. And he will, God willing, face some of the most aggressive questioning for any sitting military official, and he should. And it's time for him to tell the American people why he thinks that he's above the law and the presidency and thinks that he can go behind the back. I don't care how many people were sitting in the room. Keep it from the president. It's clear also that he's an incredible narcissist. His currency is himself. And if he told this to authors Bob Woodward and Robert Costa, he wasn't smart enough to realize that he was also implicating himself as a traitor. But that's not surprising because we've got to know Mark Milley real well. Remember, he's the guy that let Congress know he wants to understand white rage, and he's reading Ibram X. Kendi, and he was too busy doing that to pay attention to the Taliban on WhatsApp taking over Afghanistan. Oh, and also colluding with China. Apparently, General Milley wants to better understand white rage, but he really needs to understand his own and read up on treason. So on my birthday, when he goes before Congress, high-fiving a million angels for that one, General Milley may get a taste of some of that white-hot rage. And that's what should be directed at him for subverting the will of the American people. Finally, two things I want to end with. One, Republicans, if you don't do everything in your power to remove this pathetic excuse of a four-star general after the Afghanistan exit, after he committed treason against the United States, what version of America are we actually preserving? A tyrannical government with intelligence agencies, military generals free to go rogue, an IRS that tracks people? If we let this happen and General Milley is not held to account, what have we become as a nation? What are we preserving? And second, Democrats, if you don't see how dangerous this is, if you're so blinded by politics or hatred for MAGA or Trump to see how reckless this is, you are foolish. And if you're not going to hold General Mark Milley to account, then I'm worried that our differences might be, I mean, how can they be reconciled? I mean it. We either live in a republic where everyone's equal before the law and under it when it's violated, one that respects the will of the people in which generals observe the chain of command, or we don't. We either have civilian rule of the military or we don't. Either there's punishment for treason or there's not. But of course, judging by Jen Psaki's response today to a question about Milley, we can see that Democrats are going to back their man. Watch.
I'm not going to add more, speak to anonymous, unconfirmed reports about conversations with limited context from here. But what I can assure you all of is that the president knows General Milley. He has been chairman of the Joint Chiefs for almost 8 months of his presidency. They've worked side by side through a range of international events. And the president has complete confidence in his leadership, his patriotism, and his fidelity to our Constitution.
Milley confirmed it, and he had confirmed it by the time of her presser. She goes on to not only stand up for Milley, but implies Trump was such a threat that Milley's treason was justified. I'm not kidding. Watch this.
I think it's important to consider some of the context, key context of this period in time in history that we're discussing and is outlined or covered in portions of this book. The outgoing president of the United States during this period of time, fomented unrest, leading to an insurrection and an attack on our nation's capital on January 6th, which you all have covered extensively, of course. One of the darkest days in our nation's history. Beyond reports in this book, there's been widespread reporting and commentary from members of his own cabinet, the former president's cabinet, I should say, including high-ranking national security officials, questioning the former president's stability, his behavior, and his suitability to oversee the national security of the United States. So those are important questions that need to be discussed as well.
There's nothing that justifies such an accusation. To find the truth of these matters, this is why we have hearings, why we have investigations. And the spin that other people might have been in the room, you're going to hear about that anyone else was in the room is irrelevant, and do not be distracted by it. It doesn't matter if there were 50,000, 11 trillion people in that room. If none of those people were Trump, and Milley himself confirmed that with his statement that Trump was kept in the dark about this, just like the CIA kept certain info from Trump, according to a Wall Street Journal report, it's all irrelevant. It is still circumventing the constitutional process. This is the very proof of deep state. And what's more, this is the real insurrection, the real attempted coup. And this is why Democrats are so insistent on making January 6th a thing, even though the FBI concluded that it was not organized, was not a coup, was not an insurrection, and it was not planned, and no one was armed. But Democrats still insist that we nearly lost our democracy that day. Any evidence that would undo that narrative, like if there was an actual insurrection partially led by the Joint's chief of staff, they're going to ignore that. It's not a potential Trump 2024 run that they fear. It's not him that they fear. What they fear most is losing power. They do not want to lose power to you. These are people who do not believe in a civilian-controlled government. In the upside-down world of Democrats, treason is patriotism, Milley is a patriot, and they don't care about, the only priority they have is preserving their power. This is a narrative to do it. So if Democrats think that treason is patriotism and that what Milley did was heroic, then where exactly do we go from here? If they don't observe the democratic process in this republic, our law's chain of command, then what do we have in common? What binds us? And what kind of country are we preserving? I'd ask President McUnity, but he's too busy defending an actual apparent traitor. Coming up, what is Congress going to do about General Milley? South Carolina Congressman Ralph Norman joins me next to discuss. Keep it here. How much equity do you have in your home? Cybercrime experts are alerting homeowners that the more equity you have, the greater the chance criminals could target you. Home title theft is one of the fastest growing crimes, and Home Title Lock, America's leader in home title protection, is warning homeowners that they could potentially be victims and not know it. Here's how. Cyber thieves can search hundreds of public databases for high equity homes. They can find your home's online title, forge your signature stating that you sold your home, and take out loans with your equity. Insurance or common identity theft programs won't cover you. Protect your most valuable asset. Register your address to see if you could potentially be a victim. That's how you do it. And receive a complete title history of your home, a $100 value for free. Visit HometitleLock.com. Between General Mark Milley being accused of treason and the mounting evidence of failures from the Biden administration regarding the withdrawal from Afghanistan, what is Congress going to do about all of this? South Carolina Congressman Ralph Norman sits on the House Homeland Security Committee, and he's already taken steps by introducing articles of impeachment for Secretary of State Blinken. He joins me now to discuss this and the latest out of Congress. Congressman, thank you so much for your time today. It's a pleasure to have you. I just have to get your reaction to I want to talk about the impeachment articles, but I have got to get your reaction to the news that's from the past couple of days regarding the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I mean, how surprised are you at hearing something like this? What are your thoughts?
Well, Dana, it's treason. I mean, who would do this? The Secretary in his role, you don't call foreign communist countries and tell them what the president may or may not do. That's not his role. He took an oath when he got the office under President Trump. He took an oath to protect him and to loyalty, for lack of a better word, and he's done neither. And it blows my mind that he is that it's coming out now. President Trump fought not only the media, as you know, he fought, the Socialist Democrats, and now they'll have to fight his own staff. He ought to be called in front of every committee, including the Oversight Committee, to explain his role and why this isn't treason. And I don't know how he would explain his way out of it.
I don't know either. And it was very interesting to hear from former acting Secretary of Defense Miller, because at one point Miller was, the chain of command, Milley should have at least reported what he was doing to him. One of those phone calls took place on January 8th, and he was completely unaware of it and said that he didn't authorize it. Apparently there were only a select few people that even knew what was going on, and Trump and the American people and members of Congress were kept out of it. And it makes me wonder, Congressman, what else do we not know? I feel like this might be the tip of the iceberg.
Well, they get a pass when they're against Trump in any measure. And you're exactly right. What did he ever do to make people think, one, he was, not there mentally? If you want to talk about somebody not there mentally, look at the president, the current president of the United States, who can't even take any questions, can't read a teleprompter, and is making decisions that are so awful for this country. But look at what President Trump did. I guess taking out Soleimani, why wasn't the big war then when he took out a known terrorist who had killed so many Americans? It's bizarre, to be honest with you.
Oh, very bizarre. What also I find incredibly bizarre is what intelligence were they acting off of? I know it was reported in New York Times, Washington Post, Axios. They were talking about excerpts of this book, Peril, and they were saying that China apparently was uneasy because they were afraid Trump was going to, whether it was a missile strike or who knows what, that there was going to be some kind of military action. And I'm thinking, who's feeding them this intelligence, or is this just China wagging the dog and trying to get a response from the U.S.?
I think it's probably all the above. I mean, look at the disadvantage they put America in. I guess China could have taken action that would undermine this country because, if you've got any officer in Milley's role, then they could have taken advantage of us and use that as an excuse to do something. But I've never seen anything like this. It doesn't surprise me. And just like you mentioned, Dana, what do we not know? What other steps did they take to undermine the president? Not just in this instance, but in other instances. That's not their role. That's not their title to do. And it's disloyal, and it's undermining the underpinnings of the United States.
One of the spins that are defenses that we've been hearing, especially after Milley, through his spokesperson, confirmed this, which I thought was incredibly brazen. It kind of makes me think that he also is working with the two Washington Post reporters on this book, Congressman. But what really gets me about this is the defense is that, there were 15 other people sitting in that room with them. Well, I don't think any of them was the former president of the United States, Congressman. It doesn't sound like it. Does that matter to you if the president wasn't there and the people weren't informed?
Yeah. It's bizarre. And let's name those people. Let's get him in front of the Homeland Security or Oversight. And then the same thing in the Senate. Let's grill him on this. Because if he's, like you said, if he's brazen enough to admit this, which is obviously, in the military, you have you have rankings, you have things that you do and don't do. You follow, you're loyal to your superiors. And his superior was definitely the President of the United States. And look at the outrage. If this came out that somebody did this to Joe Biden, look at the outrage that the media would have. But here they're defending it, and it's just words. That's all this administration does, from Biden on down to everybody that is in power right now, including Milley and Blinken and others.
Yeah. A couple more questions on this, and I want to talk about those articles of impeachment for Blinken as well that you were filing, and we'll hopefully we'll see some kind of. I know Milley's slated to go before Congress, I think September 28th. But on this, because I've been reading so much, whether it was with Milley and then Esper's involvement, and then Miller was completely unaware of everything that was happening. Talk for a little bit of how dangerous it would have been. What if the Communist Chinese Party and the PLA had interpreted all of this and gotten from their conversations with Milley that the United States was going to preemptively attack or do something, and then they decided to go ahead and just do it right out of the gate and circumvent anything that they thought we were going to do, whether it was a missile strike or something economically, that could have been absolutely disastrous. And it's terrifying to think that we really were, maybe we were that close.
Well, it's terrifying to think that he would make the call to even and put the power on himself to make the call to a communist country that I think mistreats their people. Look at what they've done to the Uyghurs. Look at what they've done to anybody who tries to demonstrate against the the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. And, you know, it's a dereliction of duty, and he ought to have to answer for it. And, you know, you wonder how many times this happened over the course of while he served under President Trump, because it's dangerous for the country. It was a mass. You talk about for him to even think about doing that and not alert other people. It would be interesting to get the 15 people that he says that knew about it. Not that their words matter, because they don't. The truth really isn't in them. But to make them go on the record and sign and go under oath. Let's see how they are.
Yeah, I would like to see that as well. And it doesn't sound as though that he's going to go anywhere. I mean, under Barack Obama's administration, Obama-Biden, you had McChrystal, he was forced out of his role because he joked to Rolling Stone about Obama-Biden. Petraeus would privately disagree, and so he was forced out of his role. These are offenses that are, I don't even know if you can count them as offenses. I don't even think they meet the level of insubordination. But from the press conference today, from what Jen Psaki was saying, the president is sticking with Mark Milley. That, to me, I feel that that's a dangerous move. Your take on that, and then I want to ask you about Blinken.
Well, you're exactly right. And what if it happened to him? What if it happened to Joe Biden? Even he's cognitively impaired. We see that. But if it happened to him, the press would be all over it. And you're talking about treasonous. They would jump on everything. But with Trump, they majored in the minor. They picked him apart from the Ukraine call to the impeachment hearings. It was bogus. They knew it, but they had an agenda. And they had a willing press that publicized everything. Look at the hearings that took place during the time that the impeachment took place over really nothing compared to what this president is doing in 8 months. It's bizarre.
Unbelievable. And Congressman, one of those things, obviously, the disastrous drawdown in Afghanistan. You have filed articles of impeachment for Secretary Antony Blinken. Talk to us about this, because I was listening to some of his testimony today. Actually, I've watched everything that he said so far, and I'm just shocked by some of what he said. They were entirely unprepared while telling everyone that they were prepared. Their words don't meet the actions that happened on the ground.
The words don't meet the actions, and how does he explain 13 dead Americans? How does he explain leaving $80 billion of arms on the ground? How is it reasonable not to get the helicopters and all the arms back the same way they got them over there? The money that they're paying the Taliban now, the Americans that are not there. How do you explain that? And the Secretary of State, he takes an oath, as Milley did and the others, to defend and protect this country. Look at what Mike Pompeo did the time he was there. He addressed every issue. He would talk. We got members of Congress. He would talk with us, and he would tell you exactly what was going on. Our foreign allies or former allies don't respect this administration, and the Secretary of State is the tip of the spear. That's why we brought him up. And as always, we answer the question: who are you going to put him with? I mean, who's going to replace him? Because the same misguided, judgment doesn't apply. But anything, you take action, and then you let the chips fall where they may. Yeah,
there you go. Congressman, always appreciate seeing you from the beautiful state of South Carolina, as always. Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate your time with us today.
My pleasure.
It's Congressman Ralph Norman. All right, folks, what if every one of your non-cash financial transactions was automatically reported to the IRS? This is insane. Total financial surveillance. This is actually being included in the budget proposal. This is what Biden wants. Matt Welch of Reason joins me next to discuss this. Stick with us. Black Rifle Coffee Company is a veteran-owned coffee company serving premium coffee to people who love America. They develop their explosive roast profiles with the same mission focus that they learned while serving our great nation. And with every purchase you make, Black Rifle Coffee gives back. So in 2020, they donated over 6 million cups of coffee to veteran, law enforcement, and first responder causes. Their high-quality coffee beans are imported all the way from Colombia and Brazil and carefully roasted at their facilities in Tennessee and Utah. They even have a signature roast called Lava Panther that's directly sourced from a small farm farm in Guatemala. So although temperatures are not even remotely anywhere to cooling off, just keep in mind that we can think about pumpkins and fires and trick-or-treating and all that stuff. You can still enjoy the great outdoors fueled by Black Rifle Coffee. Best way to do it is with the Coffee Club, and when you join, your chosen brews roasted, packaged, and shipped right to your door. Get special discounts too and access to exclusive products. There's a lot. Purchase at blackriflecoffee.com/Dana. Use code Dana at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first Coffee Club order. All of your non-cash transactions could be soon reported to the IRS if the Biden administration has its way. Pair that with the mounting vaccine mandates, it's starting to feel like Australia. It's like they want to just punish us. Joining me now to discuss, Matt Welch, editor-at-large for Reason and host of the Reason Roundtable podcast. Matt, good to see you. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Dana. Hi.
Of course, this is crazy. And I know that this is just proposed right now. Hasn't made its way all the way through. So I don't like, getting hysterical or reacting to, I like criticizing things before it becomes law, but I want to make sure that we're clear to people that it's not here yet. But the fact that it's being proposed by people is asinine to me. This proposal that would basically allow the IRS to monitor the bank accounts of anybody that has $600 or more, doesn't that affect pretty much everybody in the United States? I think there was like a study done that, or maybe you wrote about this, that it's even the poorest income brackets, the poorest classes in the United States, that even they have like $800-something in their accounts.
Yeah, if you think about what generally happens at laws that are written that are supposed to go and soak the rich, they are oftentimes used or deftly avoided by the rich because the rich can avoid lawyers and accountants and all kinds of other things like that. This was most notable during the Obama-Biden administration with the foreign account transactions, whatever. It was called FATCA. And it was supposed to go after fat cats abroad. And what it in fact did was it made every American who has dual citizenship or works in the military or is in Switzerland or whatever, it made them file these incredibly invasive proctological exams of IRS reporting every year. I have to do it. If you hold any amount of money in a foreign financial account, you have to do this onerous reporting. And so what happened? We've seen record numbers of Americans who are disproportionately not rich renounce their citizenship because it's too much of a pain. So that's what happened last time. This time around, they're going to turn that on, and it doesn't even matter if you don't live outside of the country or have any kind of other thing. They're taking that limit down, as you said, from $10,000 of like automatic reporting to the IRS to $600. And you know what? You should be a little bit hysterical about this for the following reason, just that so much of Washington now gets passed in up or down bills, in the Cromnibus bill. You have to pass it.
That's a great point.
So when you pass it, suddenly you have $80 billion more for the IRS, and they're going after all of us.
That's crazy. So it would automatic reporting for $600 amounts, and that's what they and this is all to get more revenue, which is crazy because how much revenue do they even think that they're going to get from this practice? They're trying to find out, I guess, people who are trying to avoid government theft.
You always look for the phrase tax gap to see sort of the wish fulfillment about this. The thing about the tax gap is that it's almost exclusively rich filers who find ways to legally park their money elsewhere.
Yeah.
The actual compliance, and keep in mind, this thing is called, and I have it written over here, forgive my look, it's the American Families Plan Tax Compliance Agenda. That doesn't sound creepy. So they're going to use this thing. Americans are some of the most tax compliant people in the world. And I even hate that phrase. It sounds like we're all these sort of droids. Here. Yeah, well, we're rule followers in this country. We're not Italians, we're not the French. We don't look for ways to. I'm married to the French. I could say that, and live in an Italian neighborhood. But we look for we follow the law basically here. And so the incredible thing that Elizabeth Warren is backing very strongly, and the IRS and Joe Biden and the rest of people who otherwise spend their time talking about income inequality. What they're doing is that they're passing a law that is going to disproportionately hurt people who are poorer and who are not rich, and they're doing this in the name of closing this tax gap. In the previous iterations, it closed this much. It led to basically $1 billion a year extra in revenue. Maybe the FATCA account thing from 2009.
That's like a drop in the bucket. I know that sounds crazy to say. In DC, that's like nothing money. That's monopoly money in DC.
No, that's like 32 minutes of the federal government. Seriously, and and they use these bogus multipliers. If we spend X money on enforcement, then we're going to get 2X and 3X on that. Never happens. It just never happens. Right. That's not how tax enforcement works.
You had a great piece, Matt, to quickly talk about the vaccine mandate, about vaccine mandates and vax passes over at Reason, because now it seems like more and more localities are introducing this. LA County, I think today just said that they're going to demand proof of vaccination to go out and kind of along the lines of what New York City is doing. I don't think that that's going to be adopted nationwide. The federal government can't do it. It'd have to be piecemeal like this. But that still is, I don't like the showing of papers. I don't like the request of this. And I especially find it odd that people who say that you can't get a driver's license because that's bigotry. This is fine, the Vax Pass. Download this app and just let the government track you there too. They're already watching your bank account.
This again is a bit of a class war aspect. I mean, see the Met Gala from the other day. There were some people who had to wear masks and some people who didn't, and the ones who didn't were the help, or ones who did were the help. Mm-hmm. Though people who are going to be blocked from New York, where I live, is people who are at this point disproportionately lower income Black people are the ones who are not vaccinated. So you're just saying, hey, you know what? We don't need you in restaurants. There's something ugly about that. I don't like that. I haven't, I've been fortunate enough, even though I live here, I haven't shown I've vaccinated happily, and I encourage other people to do it. But I don't want to show papers, and I haven't, not once. And I avoid places that do it just because, for that exact American reason. I grew up in America where you didn't need a passport to go to Mexico. That all has changed for the worse, and it's done in such a way that, again, disproportionately hurts the poor in the name of trying to help them. There's something really kind of gross about that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Matt Welch, always good to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining me. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Dana.
Mm-hmm. All right, folks, coming up, the world lost an absolute legend yesterday with the passing of a friend, great comic Norm Macdonald. We'll talk about that next. Stay with us. The world lost a legend yesterday. Now, I wasn't a super close best friend of Norm Macdonald's, and we didn't meet in person, but we would message each other occasionally over the past couple of years. And he would check in when things got heavy. The announcement came yesterday while I was on radio that Norm Macdonald passed away at 61 years of age after a very long and private battle with cancer. Norm Macdonald was one of my absolute all-time favorite comics, and I adored his dry humor. I mean, who didn't? His observation on the death of redemption, that inspired my last book, Grace Canceled, and I told him so. In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Norm had said, quote, "The model used to be admit wrongdoing, show complete contrition, and then we give you a second chance. Now it's admit wrongdoing and you're finished. And so the only way to survive is to deny, 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 and that's not healthy, that there is no forgiveness," end quote. It was brilliant insight, as usual. And that kind of insight is why I've been a fan of his for a long time, that and his dry humor, and he just makes everyone laugh. I've seen, I think, virtually everything that he has ever done, including the projects for which he simply wrote. Macdonald's one of the most underappreciated comics ever, and he is one of the smartest ones ever who was ever in the business. And sometimes I think he flew over the heads of a lot of those who were less familiar maybe with his approach or work. And sometimes I think he plans it this way. I kind of wondered if his interview on The View a few years back wasn't one of those times. I wasn't sure. Macdonald is not a pushover. So whatever was percolating inside of his head, his answers and his demeanor, that was further inspiration for me to write this book. The rage mob, they had at one point believed that Norm was beyond redemption because of some of his past remarks. He had said a joke about Down syndrome, and he had defended his friends, people like Roseanne, who got him his first job in writing, and Louis C.K. He wasn't defending their actions, he was defending the fact that they could be redeemed. And I don't know what was in his heart on the day that he gave an interview about it at The View, but I know what was in my head. He acted like what the rage mob said he was, a person unworthy of redemption whose apology was meaningless. And he owned it purposefully. He was overly meek and penitent, and he didn't at all promote his show, the purpose of his booking. Whoopi Goldberg had to do it for him and kept discussing it even after Norm said that he felt weird promoting his show. Here's the moment that things got heavy. Watch this.
I realized at that moment that I'd done something unforgivable.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's like things spill out sometimes, and it's just difficult. You also you're friends with Roseanne. She gave you your first job, I
Yes,
understand.
my first job.
And so you put her together with Louis,
With Louis.
CK.
Yeah, because I was really concerned about Roseanne, and you know, I don't want someone to end up killing themselves or anything.
Of course not.
Yeah, so.
Don't you think Louis, do you say that you think they deserve a comeback? Now, I was saying yesterday that Louis performed at Comedy Cellar, and what he didn't talk about these allegations in his set, which I would have thought that he would have done. Don't you? I mean, so if he wants to have a comeback, he needs to like address it directly, I think, as a comedian. So where's Roseanne's coming back?
Geez, I don't know if Roseanne could ever come back.
Are you worried to speak now because because of the backlash?
Yeah. Norm Macdonald was something hardly anybody is today. Jarringly honest. And it's what made his comedy undeniably funny. He said what everybody was thinking out loud, even if it offended. And it was good comedy. Good comedy can often offend people. Like, for instance, these clips from SNL. Saturday Night Live, where he lampooned Bill and Hillary Clinton. This is classic. Watch.
A frightening moment this week for First Lady Hillary Clinton. Her plane, en route to the former Soviet Union, was forced to make an emergency landing when it was discovered that a frayed wire in the engine was causing serious malfunctions. The president was said to be furious and demanded an immediate investigation of what went wrong with Operation Frayed Wire.
Astronaut Shannon Lucid, back on Earth after a record 6 months in space, was welcomed home Tuesday with a phone call from President Clinton. Said the president, quote, "This is just the beginning. One day we'll be able to send an American into space indefinitely, and I hope it's a woman." Speaking in Australia this week about the problems of being America's First Lady, Hillary Clinton joked, quote, "Perhaps I'll walk around with a bag over my head when I come out into public and have no opinions and never express them publicly or privately." To which the president replied, "Yes, yes, oh God, yes!" As new questions arise about Hillary Clinton's role in Whitewater, the president appears to be distancing himself from the First Lady. Earlier today in his weekly radio address, the president insisted, "Hey, I sleep with hundreds of girls. I can't vouch for all of them, you know?"
You got to go Google the moth joke, and then when he was on with Courtney Thorne-Smith on Conan O'Brien's show, it's so worth it. This is the kind of comedy you can't do anymore. And as he battled cancer, he never told anybody about his struggles. Now, one thing's for sure, he was a brilliant talent, brilliant talent. I wrote an obit about him over at my Substack that you should read. And he actually, apparently, he came to faith. He did come to faith. He had a lot of questions about that. Our last conversation was on Bitcoin. He was asking me about the price of gold, too. There was an epic open mic night in heaven last night. That does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Good night, and don't bend the knee.